My parents bought expensive gifts for every grandkid at Thanksgiving, except mine. Then my son stood up in front of 23 people, looked straight at my mother, and asked the question nobody in that family had ever dared to ask out loud. "Grandma, why do you hate us?" You could hear silverware drop against plates. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And my mother, the woman who had spent 40 years controlling every room she entered with a smile sharp enough to cut glass, just froze. I still remember the smell in that dining room. Roasted turkey, cinnamon candles, buttery rolls cooling beside the stove. The kind of warm, perfect Thanksgiving scene people post online to pretend their families are normal. But ours never was. Mine especially. I should have known something was wrong the second we walked into my parents' house that afternoon. The energy felt staged, too cheerful, too polished. My sister Amanda was already there with her husband and their 3 kids, all dressed in matching cream-colored sweaters like they were filming a holiday commercial. My mother practically sprinted across the room when they arrived. "There are my babies," she squealed, hugging Amanda's children so tightly they laughed. Then she saw my 2 kids behind me. Her smile dimmed almost instantly. "Oh, hi, sweetheart, sweetheart." That was what she called me when she wanted distance, when she wanted the room to know I was tolerated, not loved. I smiled anyway, because my children were watching. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." She kissed my cheek without warmth and immediately turned back toward Amanda. That was our family dynamic in one moment. Amanda was the golden daughter. I was the inconvenient one. Amanda married a corporate attorney from an old money family. I married Daniel, a middle school history teacher with student loans and kind eyes. Amanda gave my parents photogenic grandkids who played lacrosse and piano. Mine liked comic books, thrift stores, and science experiments in the garage. Everything about my little family embarrassed my mother because we weren't polished enough to fit the image she spent decades curating. The crazy thing is, I spent most of my life trying to earn her approval anyway. When I was 12, I got straight A's and my mother asked why I hadn't joined more extracurriculars like Amanda had. When I got accepted into Northwestern on scholarship, she asked why I couldn't get into Yale like Amanda's husband. When Daniel proposed with his grandmother's vintage ring because we couldn't afford a new diamond, she stared at my hand for a full 10 seconds before saying, "Well, simplicity can be elegant too." Nothing was ever openly cruel. That was the genius of my mother. Everything came wrapped in plausible deniability, tiny cuts, tiny humiliations, tiny reminders that I ranked second in her world. And after years of it, you start questioning your own reality. You start wondering if maybe you really are too sensitive. Maybe you're imagining things. Maybe you deserve it somehow. But children notice what adults pretend not to see. Especially children being excluded. My son Noah was 10 that Thanksgiving. Smart, quiet, observant in ways that sometimes unnerved me. My daughter Lily was 7 and still innocent enough to believe everyone meant well. We sat through dinner listening to Amanda describe her family ski trip to Aspen while my father nodded proudly like she'd cured cancer. Every conversation somehow circled back to Amanda. Amanda's kitchen renovation. Amanda's husband's promotion. Amanda's daughter getting first chair violin. At one point, Lily tried telling my father about winning her school art contest. He interrupted halfway through to ask Amanda's son about travel baseball. I watched my daughter's face fall in real time. That tiny flicker of disappointment nearly broke me. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table because he saw it too. He always saw it. That's the thing about being loved by a healthy person after growing up around emotional manipulation. At first, it feels suspicious, like there has to be a catch, but Daniel never made me compete for affection, never withheld kindness to control me, never made me feel like love was conditional, which is probably why my parents disliked him from the beginning. He couldn't be manipulated. Dinner dragged on for almost 3 hours. By dessert, my mother suddenly clapped her hands dramatically. Oh. Before everyone leaves, we have gifts for the grandchildren. My stomach tightened instantly. Because this wasn't Christmas. Nobody had mentioned gifts. Amanda's children exploded with excitement, while my kids looked confused but hopeful. My father disappeared into the study and came back carrying massive, glossy shopping bags, designer logos everywhere. My mother knelt dramatically beside Amanda's children first. For Madison, she announced proudly, pulling out the newest iPad. The room erupted. For Ethan, a gaming console. For Charlotte, diamond earrings. Actual diamond earrings for a 13-year-old. Amanda laughed lightly. Mom, this is too much. But she didn't stop her children from tearing into thousands of dollars of gifts. I kept waiting. Surely there were more bags coming. Surely my children weren't being excluded in front of the entire family. But then my father handed Amanda's youngest grandson an envelope containing tickets to Disney World. And suddenly there were no bags left. No gifts. Nothing for Noah or Lily. The room became painfully quiet. Amanda looked uncomfortable for approximately 3 seconds before taking another sip of wine. Daniel's entire body went rigid beside me. Lily looked at me with confusion. Mommy, did Grandma forget? I saw my mother force a fake expression of concern. Oh goodness, well, your children are still a little young for expensive things. Young? One child getting diamond earrings was younger than Noah. I couldn't even process the audacity. Daniel leaned forward slowly. Linda, he said carefully, you bought gifts for every grandchild except ours? My mother sighed dramatically like she was the victim. Daniel, please don't make this awkward. Awkward. Not cruel. Not humiliating. Awkward. My father finally spoke. You know, things have been tight. That almost made me laugh because my parents were absurdly wealthy. They owned 3 properties and belonged to a country club with a waiting list longer than some college admissions offices. But apparently, they only had enough money for some grandchildren. Noah stared at the floor. Lily looked seconds away from crying. And then it happened. My son stood up from his chair. His voice shook a little, but he looked directly at my mother. Grandma, why do you hate us? Silence. Pure silence. Amanda inhaled sharply. My mother blinked rapidly, like she couldn't believe a child had exposed the truth she spent years disguising. Noah, I whispered immediately. Sit down. But he kept going. You always ignore us. You never come to my games. You forgot Lily's birthday. You only love Amanda's kids. Every adult in that room suddenly became fascinated with their plates. Because once a child says the truth out loud, everyone realizes they've been complicit. My mother's face hardened instantly. I think it's time for you all to leave. Not denial, not comfort, not reassurance, just removal. That told me everything. Daniel stood slowly. You know what? He said calmly. I agree. We gathered our coats in complete silence while my mother pretended to wipe non-existent crumbs from the counter. My father wouldn't look at me. Amanda looked embarrassed, but not enough to say anything meaningful. And right before we walked out, my mother quietly pulled me aside near the hallway. You've poisoned those children against us. I stared at her for several seconds. Then I said something I'd never said in my entire life. No, Mom, you did that yourself, and we left. The car ride home was devastating. Lily cried softly in the back seat while Noah stared out the window, pretending not to. Daniel drove with both hands gripping the wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. I felt hollow, not angry yet, just hollow, because deep down, some pathetic part of me had still hoped things would change eventually. That if I kept showing up, kept trying, kept swallowing humiliation, my parents would someday love my children the way they loved Amanda's. But watching my son ask his grandmother why she hated him shattered that illusion permanently. When we got home, Daniel tucked the kids into bed while I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at nothing. About an hour later, he sat across from me quietly. You know this can't continue. I nodded slowly. I know. No more holidays there, another nod. No more begging them to care. That one hurt. Because he was right. I had spent years begging in subtle ways, offering opportunities for connection, making excuses for their behavior, protecting their image in front of my kids. No more. The next morning, my mother texted me. I expected an apology. Instead, she wrote, "I hope you're happy." Noah humiliated me in front of the family. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I blocked her number. That was the beginning of 14 months of silence. And honestly, at first it felt like grief. People talk about cutting off toxic parents like it's empowering immediately. For me, it felt like mourning someone who never really existed. I wasn't grieving the relationship we had. I was grieving the relationship I kept hoping for. Thanksgiving passed. Then, Christmas. My parents sent extravagant gifts to Amanda's children online and ignored mine completely. Not even a card. Lily stopped asking about them after February. Noah never asked again at all. Kids adapt faster than adults when they realize who is safe, and slowly our house became peaceful. There was no anxiety before family events, no emotional hangover after phone calls, no constant feeling of performing for approval. Daniel and I started creating our own traditions, movie nights, weekend pancake breakfasts, volunteering at shelters during holidays, small things, healthy things, the kind of family environment I never had growing up. Then March arrived, and everything changed. I got a call from a law office downtown. At first I thought it was spam, but the woman on the phone asked for me specifically. "Miss Bennett? I'm calling regarding the estate of Eleanor Whitmore." I nearly dropped my coffee. Eleanor Whitmore was my grandmother, my mother's mother. She'd passed away almost a year earlier in assisted living, and despite living only 40 minutes away, my mother rarely visited her. I visited every week, sometimes twice, not because I expected anything, because Grandma Eleanor was the only adult in my childhood who loved me without conditions. She used to slip me peppermint candies during family dinners and whisper, "Don't let your mother convince you you're hard to love." I didn't understand those words fully until adulthood. The attorney continued carefully. "There are some documents requiring your presence." I frowned. "My mother handles her estate." Long pause. "Actually, no, she does not." That meeting changed my life. Apparently, 6 months before her death, my grandmother quietly amended her trust. And she left nearly everything to me. Not Amanda, not my mother, me. The attorney explained that Grandma Eleanor had become concerned about financial irregularities involving my mother. Over the years, my parents had slowly gained control over many of her accounts under the excuse of helping manage things. But according to records Grandma later uncovered, large sums had been redirected into luxury purchases, investment properties, and Amanda's business ventures. My chest went cold listening to it. The attorney slid paperwork across the table. My grandmother had documented everything, every unauthorized transfer, every suspicious withdrawal, every discrepancy. And then came the final shock. My grandmother specifically wrote that she trusted me to distribute portions of the estate responsibly because I was the only member of this family who consistently demonstrated compassion without financial motive. I cried right there in that office, not because of the money, because someone saw me. After a lifetime of being treated like less, someone saw my worth clearly. But the situation became much uglier after that, because my parents apparently believed the estate belonged to them already, and when they learned about the amended trust, they lost their minds. My mother showed up at our house 3 days later for the first time in over a year. No call, no apology, just pounding on our front door hard enough to scare Lily. Daniel answered before I could. My mother pushed past him immediately. "You manipulated her." There it was. Not grief, not confusion. Accusation. I stood slowly from the couch. You haven't spoken to your grandchildren in 14 months. This isn't about that. Exactly. It never was. She started pacing our living room furiously. She was confused near the end. You took advantage of her. I almost laughed at the irony. Because Grandma Eleanor had been sharper than anyone in the family until the day she died. My mother knew that. You stole from her, I said quietly. She froze. For one split second, fear flashed across her face. Then anger covered it again. Watch yourself. No, I'm done watching myself around you. Daniel moved closer beside me, solid, calm, protective. My mother pointed toward me dramatically. You think this means you've won something? I looked her directly in the eye. No, I think Grandma finally saw you clearly. She slapped me. Hard. Lily screamed from the hallway. Noah came running downstairs, and Daniel immediately stepped between us. Get out! My mother suddenly looked startled, like she hadn't expected consequences. Daniel, leave. Now, she stared at him for several seconds before grabbing her purse with shaking hands, and right before she reached the door, she turned toward me one last time. You have no idea what you're starting. She was right. Because what followed became a 14-month legal war that destroyed every illusion our extended family still had about my parents. The lawsuit came first. My mother and father contested the amended trust, claiming undue influence and mental incompetence. Basically, they argued Grandma Eleanor was too confused to understand what she signed, which would have worked if Grandma hadn't prepared for exactly that possibility. The woman was brilliant. She recorded meetings with independent attorneys, completed cognitive evaluations, documented concerns about my parents siphoning money. There were emails, bank statements, witness testimony from assisted living staff. The deeper investigators dug, the uglier things became. Turns out, my parents had been quietly draining funds for years. Not enough to trigger immediate suspicion, just enough to maintain the lifestyle they believed they deserved. And Amanda? She knew. That revelation hurt almost worse than anything, because even after everything, some small part of me still believed my sister wasn't malicious. Weak, maybe. Self-absorbed, definitely. But not cruel. I was wrong. Amanda had benefited from stolen money for years while pretending not to notice where it came from. Luxury vacations, her boutique startup, private school tuition, all partially funded by Grandma Eleanor's accounts. Once forensic accountants got involved, panic spread through my family like gasoline catching fire. Suddenly, relatives who ignored me for years started calling. My Aunt Carol whispered, "Honey, your mother says you're trying to bankrupt them." I answered calmly. They did that themselves. My cousin Rachel admitted everyone always suspected favoritism, but nobody realized how deep the corruption went. Even my father started contacting me privately. At first he tried guilt. Your mother is under tremendous stress. Interesting choice of concern considering his grandchildren cried themselves to sleep after Thanksgiving. Then came bargaining. If you drop the civil claims, we can resolve this quietly. Quietly. That word again. Families like mine survive on silence. Silence protects abusers. Silence protects reputations. Silence protects systems everyone secretly knows are rotten. But I was done being quiet. The legal process dragged on for months. Depositions, financial audits, mediation attempts, and through all of it, my mother maintained the same performance. Victimhood. According to her, I was vindictive, ungrateful, manipulated by my husband. She told relatives I'd always been jealous of Amanda. That one almost made me laugh because jealousy implies wanting someone else's life. I never wanted Amanda's life. I wanted basic dignity. There's a difference. One night after a brutal deposition, I broke down in our bedroom. I remember sitting on the floor crying while Daniel rubbed my back quietly. "I hate this," I whispered. "I know. I hate who they become around money." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed me. "No, this is who they've always been. Money just removed the disguise. That hit hard because it was true. The favoritism wasn't random. Amanda represented status. Image, return on investment. I represented independence, and controlling people hate independent children because they can't be managed through approval. The courtroom hearings finally began the following autumn. I'll never forget the first morning. My mother arrived wearing pearl earrings and a navy designer suit, performing grief for anyone willing to watch. Amanda sat beside her looking pale and exhausted. My father looked 10 years older, and when my mother saw me enter with Daniel, she smiled coldly, like she still believed she'd win. The hearing lasted 6 days, 6 exhausting, emotionally brutal days. Financial experts testified. Medical professionals testified. Staff from Grandma Eleanor's assisted living facility testified. One nurse described how Grandma cried after realizing money was disappearing from her accounts. Another witness recalled my mother pressuring staff to restrict my grandmother's phone access. The courtroom energy shifted visibly after that, but the real explosion came on day 5. Because Grandma Eleanor had left one final piece of evidence. A handwritten letter sealed with her estate documents. The judge allowed it into record. And when the attorney began reading it aloud, my mother's confidence finally cracked. The letter said, "To my granddaughter Claire, if you are hearing this, then I was right to fear your mother would challenge my wishes. I need you to know something clearly. None of this was ever your fault." I stopped breathing. The courtroom disappeared around me. All I could hear was Grandma's voice through those words. Your mother punished you for being difficult to control. She rewarded Amanda for obedience. This family called it favoritism. But it was emotional cruelty, and I regret not stopping it sooner. Amanda started crying immediately. My father stared at the floor. And my mother? White. Completely white. The attorney continued reading. Claire, you loved me when I had nothing left to offer you. You visited me when nobody was watching. You brought your children to see me even after your mother tried to isolate me. That matters more than money ever will. I was shaking by then. Daniel grabbed my hand tightly. Then came the final paragraph, the one that destroyed everything. I have included documentation identifying unauthorized financial transfers conducted primarily by my daughter Linda Bennett and facilitated through accounts connected to Amanda Cole Enterprises. Amanda made a strangled sound beside her attorney. Faces turned instantly. The judge looked up sharply. And for the first time during the entire case, genuine panic spread across my family's faces. Because suddenly this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. Now there was documented evidence tying Amanda directly to financial misconduct. My mother whispered something frantically to her attorney. Too late. The judge requested the financial exhibits immediately. I still remember the exact sound of papers sliding across that courtroom. It sounded like an avalanche. Then the judge started reading account names aloud. Transfer amounts, property purchases, business deposits, and finally, Amanda's company. The second the judge read that name, Amanda burst into tears. Not graceful crying, panic crying. The kind people do when they realize the lie is collapsing publicly. My father closed his eyes completely. And my mother, my terrifying, composed, image-obsessed mother, looked genuinely afraid for the first time in my life. The judge's voice became ice cold. These transactions appear highly inappropriate. Highly inappropriate. Such restrained words for something so ugly. Opposing counsel tried arguing the transfers were authorized gifts, but the evidence buried them. Dates didn't match. Signatures didn't match. Medical records contradicted their timeline completely. And then came the moment I'll never forget for the rest of my life. The judge looked directly at my mother and asked, Mrs. Bennett, are you claiming your mother fabricated years of financial documentation in order to falsely accuse her own family after death? My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because there was no lie left big enough to cover the truth. The ruling arrived 3 weeks later. My parents lost everything. Not literally everything, but enough. The trust remained fully valid. Financial penalties were imposed. Civil investigations expanded. Amanda's business finances were audited. Properties purchased through diverted funds faced seizure review. The country club whispers started immediately. Friends disappeared. Extended relatives stopped returning their calls. And suddenly, the same image my mother worshipped her entire life turned against her. But here's the strange part. When the ruling came down, I didn't feel triumphant. I expected satisfaction, vindication, maybe even joy. Instead, I felt calm, like a wound finally stopped bleeding. Because revenge isn't always screaming victory while someone else burns. Sometimes it's simply surviving long enough to watch the truth become undeniable. A week after the ruling, my father came to our house alone. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted closure. He stood on our porch looking smaller somehow, older. He asked if we could talk. We sat at the kitchen table while Daniel stayed nearby. My father stared at his hands for a long time before speaking. I should have protected you. Simple words. 40 years late, I waited for anger to rise, but mostly I just felt tired. You watched her hurt my children. His eyes filled instantly. I know. You watched her hurt me my entire life. Another nod. Then came the sentence I never expected from my father. I was afraid of your mother. That shattered something in me, because suddenly I saw the truth clearly. My father wasn't innocent. But he was weak, and weak people enable cruelty every single day because courage costs something. I can't fix this, he whispered. No, I said softly. You can't. He cried quietly at my kitchen table for almost 10 minutes. Then he left. I haven't seen him since. Amanda tried contacting me next, not to apologize fully. People like her rarely do that. She wanted healing, closure, mutual understanding. But healing without accountability is just another manipulation tactic. So I asked her one question. Did you ever notice how differently Mom treated my kids? Long silence. Then quietly, yes, that answer ended everything. Because awareness changes the entire story. If you benefit from cruelty while recognizing it's happening, you become part of it. I told her I wished her well. Then I blocked her too. Life became quieter after that. Peacefully quiet. The kind of quiet I used to think only existed in movies. No tension before holidays. No emotional landmines. No exhausting performance for conditional love. Just peace. The money from Grandma Eleanor's estate changed practical things, of course. We paid off our mortgage, started college funds for Noah and Lily. Daniel finally took the summer archaeology program in Greece he'd dreamed about for years. But honestly, the greatest gift wasn't financial. It was freedom. Freedom from needing people who never deserved access to us. The next Thanksgiving, we stayed home. Just the 4 of us. No fancy table settings, no designer wine, no exhausting emotional theater. We cooked together in pajamas. Lily burned the rolls slightly. Daniel pretended the turkey was trying to attack him, and Noah sat across from me during dinner, looking unusually thoughtful. Then he asked quietly, Mom? Yeah? Are you sad we don't see Grandma anymore? The old version of me would have lied. Protected adults, protected appearances. But I was done teaching my children dishonesty, disguised as politeness. So I answered truthfully. Sometimes I'm sad about what I wished she could have been. Noah nodded slowly. Then he said something that nearly made me cry. I like our holidays better now. Me too. Later that night, after the dishes were done and the kids were asleep, I stood alone on our back porch wrapped in a blanket, watching snow fall softly across the yard. And for the first time in my entire life, I understood something important. Family isn't people who share your blood. Family is people who protect your peace. People who make children feel safe instead of ranked. People who don't force you to audition for love. I used to think surviving my childhood made me strong because I learned how to endure pain quietly. But real strength turned out to be something else entirely. Real strength was refusing to pass that pain down to my children. Real strength was ending the cycle even when it meant standing alone. My mother spent decades believing power came from control, from money, from favoritism, from deciding who received affection and who had to earn it. But she was wrong, because the most powerful thing in the world is a person who no longer needs your approval. That's when manipulators lose everything. Sometimes people ask if I regret taking legal action against my family. I don't. What I regret is how long I tolerated behavior that hurt my children. I regret every excuse I made, every humiliation I minimized, every moment I taught my kids to quietly accept exclusion because I was too emotionally conditioned to confront it. But regret can teach you things if you let it. Now my children know something I never learned at their age. Love should not feel like competition, and if someone repeatedly makes you feel small, unwanted, or invisible, their title in your life does not excuse their behavior. Grandmother. Mother. Sister. None of those words matter more than basic human decency. A few months ago, Noah asked me why Grandma Eleanor left everything to me instead of splitting it equally. I told him the truth. Because she trusted us to use it with kindness. He thought about that for a second. Then he smiled a little. Good thing she picked right. I laughed so hard I cried. And maybe that's the real ending to this story. Not the courtroom, not the money, not watching people face consequences. The real ending is this. My children no longer question whether they are loved. The cycle stopped here. If you're listening to this while dealing with toxic family members who treat you like the permanent outsider, hear me clearly. You are not difficult to love because someone failed to love you correctly. And protecting your peace is not cruelty. Sometimes walking away from people who share your blood is the first step toward building a life where your children never have to ask why they weren't chosen. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever sat through family dinners swallowing hurt while everyone pretended nothing was wrong, I hope you remember this the next time someone tells you to keep the peace. Peace built on your silence was never peace to begin with.